Okay. Good morning. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I am pleased to be with Governor Newsom today. Also with me is Dan Torres, Special Assistant here at the Department of Justice. This has become a very frequent sight, but we're not going to stop doing what we need to do until and unless the federal government stops trying to change the law by breaking the law. And so we're here today because, once again, this administration has taken an action which we intend to prove in court is not permissible by law. It is not permissible by our American moral standards, and it is not permissible if we want to be an economic power moving into the 21st century. Probably the best way to start is to say something we all know. We have all seen the reports of the conditions at immigration camps, and we've all seen the images of children locked up in cages. The Trump administration is holding children and families in jail-like conditions for weeks. These are individuals, and certainly children, who have not committed any criminal violation. Too often they're being held without sufficient food, health, or even medical care. Children have been forced to go without basic hygiene products that we all take for granted, like soap and toothbrushes, and they are being held in these conditions for much longer than is ever necessary, even when a relative is ready and willing and able to care for those children. No child deserves to be left in conditions inappropriate and harmful for their age. The actions by this administration aren't just morally reprehensible. As I said, they're illegal. Children don't become subhuman simply because they are migrants. All children are God's children. They're our children, and they're America's children, and America never should treat them otherwise. This new Trump anti-Flores settlement rule, and once again, we're talking right now about a rule that the Trump administration has promulgated that would undo what was known as the Flores settlement of more than 2 decades ago. This new rule callously puts at risk the safety and well-being of children. It also undermines a decades-old agreement reached in court by the federal government to prevent the unlawful detention of our immigrant children. Since 1997, the Flores Settlement Agreement has provided the legal guidelines for the treatment of children in immigration custody, including that they should be provided food, drinking water, emergency medical assistance, toilets, sinks, temperature control, supervision, and as much as possible separation from unrelated adults as possible. There's not a thing I just listed off that you wouldn't expect for your child if you were separated lawfully or unlawfully from your child. As well, the Flores Settlement Agreement calls for the government to release children from immigration detention to their parents, adult relatives, or licensed programs within 72 hours and without unnecessary delay. I guarantee you we will turn up cases where children have been held not just beyond 72 hours, likely beyond 72 days in these detention facilities. This administration has failed to follow the rules, and now they want to rewrite them as well. Last year, the Trump administration proposed a new rule that eliminates several critical protections in the Flores Settlement Agreement. They did that last year. California has been deeply involved in protecting that settlement agreement, the Flores Settlement Agreement, since we saw where they were trying to go. But once again, this administration has callously ignored the rights of states and the rights of individuals and the safety and well-being of all these immigrant children. And they moved forward. And that's why today we're moving forward as well. Along with my friend and colleague, the Attorney General of the state of Massachusetts, Maura Healey, and joined with 18 other states in the District of Columbia, California is leading the charge in the defense of children. Those 20 AGs are taking on the Trump administration because we wish to protect children. We wish to protect them from irreparable harm, which may be caused by this unlawful detention orchestrated by the Trump administration. detention, which is unnecessary. We are ready to stand up for the Flores settlement in court and defend this decades-old agreement that protects children from things that you and I would never permit our children to ever experience. The Trump administration made the changes called for in this rule without regard to the well-being of these children and without regard to the rule of law. And of course, it should not surprise anyone that we believe the Trump administration is violating the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment in the Constitution. This administration is not above the law. They cannot rewrite the rules to detain children for a prolonged period of time and infringe on the rights of states in the process. We are ready to fight for the most vulnerable among us, and we will do it whatever it takes to protect all of our communities. That's why I'm actually making a second announcement today as well, because today we are also filing a preliminary injunction to stop the Trump administration's un-American public charge rule, which we discussed just last week. We are going to court seeking that preliminary injunction to keep this rule from going into effect while we make our case in court. Here in California, we are home to more immigrants than any other state in the nation, and we have the fifth largest economy because we are a nation and a state of immigrants. That rule, the public charge rule, would bar the path to citizenship for immigrants and force families to make impossible choices between putting food on the table and reuniting with their loved ones. That rule touches all of America's communities, and it hurts us all. We know we are stronger when we welcome and invest in all of our communities, and we will continue to fight the Trump administration's unlawful immigration policies every step of the way. With that, I now turn it over to the governor of the great state of California, Gavin Newsom.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Public charge is nothing more than family separation by another name. A mother has to decide whether to feed their kids or walk in front of someone that arbitrarily can make a determination of whether that person is a quote-unquote public charge and is deemed warranted for deportation. It is perverse, and I appreciate the Attorney General's work and diligence and attention to that, as well as his leadership once again on the issue that brings you all here today, number 58. I don't think when we started this was something we ever could have imagined. And as you say, Mr. Attorney General, this is not something we brought on the Trump administration. The Trump administration has brought this on himself. I'm just proud to live in a state like California with your leadership. A state, as you say, rightfully, is a state of immigrants, 27% again of this state, foreign-born. Remarkable diversity that no other state in America can claim. With that, we also are a state that cares deeply about our children, and this notion that you can indefinitely intern the children in this state is perverse, unconscionable, clearly in violation of Flores, and clearly warrants this action by the Attorney General and the Attorney Generals of 20 states in this country. I am a father. I have a strong bias. It's the lens to which I see the world. If you want to know how you're performing as a state, as a nation, look in the eyes of young people. That bias is expressed in a lot of the work we do. Recently, you noted that some of you have written, we announced that we created a new Surgeon General position in this state. Her purpose is to focus on ACEs, early childhood trauma. I connect that dot because this is exactly what this administration is proffering. This is what they're advancing. The policies of this administration are exacerbating the early childhood trauma of young children. 7, by the way, who've lost their lives. In just 2.5 years, the Trump administration has overseen 7 young men and women's lives lost. The entire 2 terms of the Obama administration, not one child in their custody lost their life. I mean, to claim that this is about children is laughable and ludicrous. And so, with respect, I again express my admiration to the leadership of the state, the Attorney General, and deep appreciation for standing up to the rule of law, the principles of the Flores settlement, and having the backs of our diverse communities. Let me end with this. I had the privilege of being down in El Salvador the origins of the Flores settlement, obviously El Salvador. It is bewildering to me. I just finished watching, many of you did as well, the President's G7 press conference. He was asked about climate change. He was asked about these broader issues of China. Again, I remind you, China is making inroads in Central America. China is making historic investments in Central America. We are pulling out of our commitments in Central America. If you want to address the issues and address the issues that allegedly are at play here as it relates to the issues of migrants seeking asylum in the United States of America, you deal with the origins. You deal with what's happening in the Northern Triangle. This administration's pulled all their money, all the investment out of the areas, not only in El Salvador, but throughout the region. And now we have countries like China asserting themselves. We're focused on this thing over here on trade wars. There's something else happening in Central America. I only bring that up because as a child of the 80s, it's indelible in my mind what was going on in El Salvador, the history of this country, history of a former governor of California, Ronald Reagan, in relationship to his leadership and the work that we were doing in Central America. All these things are connected, and it's extraordinarily frustrating that we're here reacting at this moment as opposed to more systemically addressing the root causes in a much more nuanced and sophisticated way. Those days seem to be over for the moment, and so we are left with doing what we're doing today. It's appropriate, it's warranted, it's just once again unfortunate.
Questions? Yes.
Yeah, so it's my understanding that the attempt to roll back the Flores settlement, a judge is going to have a say on whether that can happen or not, and then the original lawyers from the Flores case could file their lawsuit. So is a state-based lawsuit necessary when a judge already has to weigh in on whether they can do that rollback?
And I have Dan Torres here who can respond to some of the more specific questions, but the state has interest in this. California's interest, its economy, its people, will be impacted, and so we have an interest in participating in any resolution of this matter, whether it be the proposed rule or the continuation of the Flores settlement agreement. And so we are in here, we are going to go in as a party because the interests of our state are at stake. And so we have every right to try to be part of any discussion on what happens to the Flores settlement. And certainly we're there trying to defend the same people that the original litigants, the original plaintiffs, are trying to protect. And so we have a concurrent purpose in mind, but there are some things that we must defend that even some of those plaintiffs in the Flores settlement agreement could not defend because they don't defend the interests of the entire state of California and the 40 million people, as the governor and those of us who are state representatives would.
Can you guys provide any insight as to how you judge what you're going to file a suit on or not, or your criteria for how you're deciding what you're pressing here?
Pretty simple. My job is to enforce the law. The governor has a responsibility to make sure that 40 million people have their best interests protected as well. Every time someone tries to violate the law, break the law, or harm California, its values or its resources, we'll step up. Unfortunately, close to 60 times now, this administration has taken actions which would harm the people of the state of California. And in most of the cases that we filed, we have been victorious so far in the rulings that we've secured. And so I think we're proving that you should not try to change the law by breaking the law.
And just, it's a point of pride. I think these values are broadly shared by the vast majority of leaders in this state. And as a consequence, the Attorney General is well-resourced as it relates to these efforts, and he should never be in doubt about our commitment to have his back as he pursues justice.
Please make sure you write that in the articles.
Now, there's some other areas where we have conversations.
Yeah.
Attorney General, or the Governor, just a few technical questions. You mentioned that the complaint mentions it would violate state licensure requirements. Are we talking about ASHPAD? The $1 billion figures up there, is that state or federal? And then the lawsuits, is that 57?
So I'm going to call Dan in here to give more detailed response because I want to make sure I don't make a mistake. But the states, this I believe is federal, national, the impact. But California, being the largest state, California being the state with the most immigrants, obviously bears the lion's share of the harm that comes economically to our state. The type of healthcare violations that we allege, whether they are licensing and otherwise, they impact the ability for our state of California to make sure that if someone wants to provide important health care or wellness services, in California, we require certain standards to be met. You're not allowed to violate the standards that California has set simply because you're doing a job for the federal government. We still have a right to make sure that the job that's done in California protects the health and well-being of the people who are in our state. Those are responsibilities that the U.S. Constitution leaves for states, and the federal government doesn't have a right to tell us how we provide for the well-being, health, and safety of the people in our state. But let me see if Dan wants to add anything. And Dan, go ahead and give your name and spell it.
Good morning. Dan Torres, Torres. I'm a special assistant to the Attorney General. And one of the things to remember is that the Flores Settlement Agreement required that detention of children be in situations where the states have a licensing role. And that was important because we wanted to make, in the agreement, states would have this power of and experience of regulating child welfare, right? So that in this new regulation is changing. The regulation now creates another system where the treatment of accompanied minors is going to be different, and the treatment of unaccompanied minors will also be different. Accompanied minors, kids with their parents, will be placed in family detention facilities, and the state licensing role has been usurped in this regulation. So the federal government will create a family detention scheme across the country, and rather than rely on states' role of regulating the care of kids in custody, they're going to create their own standards and contract out to private companies to hold kids in custody with parents. That's a huge loss to the due process rights of children, because states, again, have the expertise, have the police power, have the experience to regulate the care and custody of children. So this is the states have usually different departments that license facilities like foster family homes. This accompanied minor scheme will now go to Homeland Security and Health and Human Services Agency, the Office of Refugee Resettlement. Together will have a role in coming up with standards for kids who are held in family detention facilities. So that's a huge departure from past practice, from the Flores Settlement Agreement itself, and from the way we care for kids. Accompanied minors will also unaccompanied minors will also have a big change in that they too could be held in these facilities in more instances than they have in the past. So again, we're concerned about unaccompanied children and the standard of care that they will experience when they're placed in federal custody moving forward. And to your question, the role of states is really critical here, because once the Flores Settlement Agreement is superseded by regulations, the role of class counsel is also diminished. So states really have to step in and help be vigilant and watch what happens for these kids.
Governor, do you want to add anything? No, it's good. Right.
You talked a little bit about a lot of resources from the state going to you and your ability to fight these lawsuits. Can you talk at all about how much the state has put into these lawsuits so far? How much money we spent on them?
Governor Newsom, like Governor Brown and the legislature, have addressed the increased load that we have in trying to tackle these assaults on California, legal assaults. And fortunately, what I can tell you is the return on the dollar has been tremendous. You can imagine what would have happened to California, the largest state with the largest population of immigrants, had the federal government succeeded in in including a citizenship question on the census, which probably would have dissuaded many, many families from even filling out the form. And every time someone doesn't get counted, that's lots of money that California loses, because our taxpayer dollars that we send to the Treasury won't return to us if we have the lower our count is in our state. And so the billions that we saved dwarf the money it costs to litigate and take that all the way to the Supreme Court and then win. I can tell you of two particular cases where law enforcement was going to be denied money, under what are called JAG grants for law enforcement, where the money is used by local law enforcement for training, for equipping our local police and sheriff's agencies throughout the state. Some $30 million in each case would have been denied by the federal government because they wanted us to do immigration enforcement for them. And we said that's not our responsibility. We won those cases, again, for a fraction, a minute fraction of the cost. We were able to defend the state, and we are now, under court order, supposed to get that money. And while the Trump administration may try to appeal, we continue to win those cases. So fortunately, the small amount that we've gotten allocated by the legislature with the governor's support has helped make sure that we can continue to defend 40 million Californians, our values, and our resources. And let the governor respond as well.
Yeah, it's a profoundly small amount of money compared to the totality of a budget. And at stake is it's not just JAG grants and the assault on sanctuary cities and the threats about taking resources and money, taking because of AB 54 states' resources or SB 54 as it relates to our sanctuary state status, high-speed rail. You can go down the list of the money that's at stake, but it's our values. It's who we are as a people. It's what we represent. It's what we assert, and those don't have a price tag. I'm not going to go the visa priceless here, but I am going to suggest that there are things that are more important than money. And it relates to this moment in our history. This is a profoundly important moment, and I'm just, I'm proud we're in a position to resource this. Many other states cannot, and that's why they look to California's leadership. And that's why you see this Attorney General leading the charge. When you ask Chris, why aren't other Attorney Generals doing it? A lot are not in that position, and a lot are frankly more timid and aren't willing to lead. We have an Attorney General who leads. He's not timid, and we share deep values. These are not intellectual. It's about who we are. There's a congruency to our cause, and I think that is overwhelmingly supported in the legislature as well.
Can we hear a statement in Spanish?
Yeah, why don't I do that towards the end? Okay. Yes.
Just a quick question. You mentioned the number of lawsuits filed already against the Trump administration. Do we know if that number is unprecedented? Has the Attorney General's office or the state of California ever filed that many lawsuits against a single administration?
Those questions about the lawsuits always come from the direction of California doing that. To me, what's unprecedented is the way the federal government, the Trump administration, is attacking states and attacking families in ways that are illegal. Every time we go to court, for the most part, we win. We're proving that this administration is trying to do things the wrong way by breaking the rules. That's what's unprecedented, to see a president who continues to use the levers of government in a way that diminish lives and, quite honestly, injure lives. We can't put up with it because we've got too many lives that we've got to help, and we've got an economy that we've got to keep going, and we've got folks who want to have a better future. So we're doing what we must. That question really should be posed to the administration. Why do they persist to try to change the law by breaking the law?
Well stated. I could not agree more with that. I mean, we don't wake up. I don't believe the Attorney General wakes up. I certainly don't wake up looking, around the house, find a crowbar to put in the spokes of the wheel of the Trump administration. Quite the contrary. But we pick up the paper, read the morning, read the morning tweets, and your jaw drops. It's just another assault on our value. I mean, go through if you actually go through the list, we're again reacting to this unprecedented assault on due process, the rule of law in this country.
Dan.
So 3 questions. Do you know how many of these kids are in California? How many facilities in California? And if they are in danger, why can't you use, or the state use its police powers to go take over?
That's 2 questions. Where's the
3
third?
questions.
Oh.
How many kids, how many facilities, and police powers?
And Dan might have the answers. Let me see if you have the answers to the first 2 questions. And you can give a go at the third if you want.
Sure. So again, this is a forward-looking situation we're in. Kids that are accompanied with parents, we don't have currently facilities that hold families in custody together in California. Texas has 2, but we don't have those yet here. We don't hope to. We don't want them. This is what the rule contemplates. What will happen. We do have usually the largest share of unaccompanied minors that come to California, and those numbers we can get you, but they've been in around 6,000, 7,000 range per year. And California receives the most unaccompanied minors in the country.
6,000 or 7,000 kids today.
Correct, per year, correct. And more nationally, that numbers, I mean, California itself gets that figure per year. But then nationally, the number is larger.
And by the way, not all end up in California, which is an important point. They may enter into California, but go all across the country. Forgive me.
Then that's right, Governor. Often the effort has been to reunite them with family members, and their family might be in other places around the country, so they get placed with other homes. Correct.
Well, so where are they held? How many facilities are there?
So accompanied minors, they're Texas.
How many of these minors are in California, and how many facilities?
So currently, unaccompanied minors in California are placed in foster family homes or individual foster families. Take them in. Again, we're talking about 6,000 to 7,000 right now per year. And so that's currently a role that California plays, is licensing those foster family homes. And that's a role that for unaccompanied minors, we intend to engage in and make sure those kids are properly cared for. It's the accompanied minors. That's a whole new regime that's being created. And
That's why we're in court, is to stop the Trump administration from trying to change the rules which require them to find a decent placement for these children. And if they're going to be held in custody, it has to be a short period, and it has to be under conditions that you and I would see as basic humane conditions.
So I'm sorry. So are these kids held for no more than 72 hours before they're put into a foster?
That's the way it's supposed to be. That's the current state of affairs, which the Trump administration wants to break. So back to the question, why are we filing so many lawsuits? Because they're trying to break the current rules, and they're trying to break the rules by breaking the law. No, we don't stand for that. Yeah, right over here, then over here.
So are you concerned then that the Trump administration changing the rule for accompanied minors is the first step toward them overturning the rules for treatment of unaccompanied minors, which California actually has?
They're trying to change all of this. They're trying to make it so they don't have to offer the types of conditions that courts have held are essential for children. Basic human services. They're trying to change that. They don't want to have to go through those steps. They don't like the scrutiny. And so whether it's accompanied or unaccompanied minors, as well as non-children immigrants, they're trying to change the rules. That's why, as I said, we're going into court to seek a preliminary injunction against their change for the rule that applies to legal immigrants, not even those who are seeking asylum or are undocumented. This is legal immigrants where they're trying to change the rules now. And we're simply saying that what they are trying to do is not only make life more difficult for people in this country, they're trying to break the law and violate the Constitution.
But this new rule from the Department of Homeland Security has to do with accompanied minors, which you said California doesn't hold any. They're all in Texas. So you said this is a preliminary strike because you're concerned that they'll then change the rule for unaccompanied minors as
So
well?
this rule affects both accompanied minors and unaccompanied minors, and they do it in different ways. To your first point, yes, we are concerned that this rule is going to diminish the due process rights of both types of categories of kids. For unaccompanied minors, for example, the new rule deprives their ability to get bond, to get out of custody sooner. So that's a big departure from prior case law and rules. So to your question, yes, we're very concerned. We're watching out for both categories of kids.
Yeah, so how much is it costing California a year for these kids who are in a foster care program? I'm just trying to compare those numbers to what we're looking at per year to keep them in a detention center.
We can get numbers for you, but those kids that are placed in foster care are the unaccompanied minors that we're talking about are placed in foster care that's overseen by the Office of Refugee Resettlement, the federal agency. So they would be the ones that have that data.
Including, by the way, you have
And
one
pay for that.
Yeah, you also have a facility in your backyard here in YOLO. And then you've got, I mean, the complexity of this, you guys have written a lot about it, so you understand it. But it's even made more complex when you consider what California is investing for refugees down in San Diego in a new facility, in a new shelter, where a lot of these families, after they're processed, are dumped out on the streets and sidewalks, typically, and it's not a gross exaggeration, and forgive the looseness of that language, I was being precise, literally thrown out onto the streets and sidewalks in and around Greyhound bus stations, many being trafficked, many ending up on the streets and homeless. So we have organized that in a deliberative way using state general fund resources in an unprecedented way. Most other states don't do that, and we are helping organize the transportation needs and the health and safety needs of accompanied minors, as well as many asylum seekers generally. So again, there are a lot of buckets here, a lot of different funding sources. The Yolo County facility is a unique, distinctive facility, and there is oversight of the state, even though it's federally funded. So again, nuance and complexity in this space, but happy to provide, our staff could provide as well, sort of a matrix of sorts of all of the facilities in the state. We can get you a current census, get you a sense of the costs of this, the oversight responsibilities legally, and then the supplemental oversight that the state is purposely investing in.
Any final question?
What's the process right now for accompanied minors that come to California? Because you said we don't have facilities designed for that, so what does that process look like?
Let me hear.
So,
And this will be the last question.
So accompanied minors, pursuant to the Flores settlement agreement, cannot be placed or kept in custody for more than 20 days. So they get released to sponsors who can care for them. And usually it's a relative. And if not, then they get placed in unaccompanied care like other children who don't have a sponsor yet.
So they're temporarily held with their
Parent up to 20 days is what the Flores court has said is permissible.
Can you answer Dan's question too about the police powers?
Sorry, what was the question? Down the field, police powers?
Just eminent domain of oversight or custody? Yeah, no, limited.
We have rights. The state has rights. The Constitution grants states rights when it comes to policing, welfare of the people, and so that's why we have the right to make sure that facilities that are providing care that requires medical treatment, health care services are appropriately provided. Again, we have to respect the federal government's prerogative when it comes to immigration, but if they're going to be holding someone and if you have to care for them, especially a child, we have standards that the federal government can't just simply say it's going to ignore those things under the Constitution and based on the laws that we have. Let me say real quick words, and I know the governor has to leave, just in Spanish. Hoy estamos anunciando otra vez que esta administración del presidente Trump trata de violar los derechos de humanos y en este caso, más que nada, los derechos de los niños aquí en los Estados Unidos. Todos tenemos derechos, no tenemos que ser ciudadanos para tener derechos y nuestros niños, claro, que tenemos un interés más alto en protegerlos. Desafortunadamente, esta administración ha decidido que los niños no merecen las protecciones de la Constitución y las protecciones que uno como padre que son básicos. Y por eso este día anunciamos aquí con el gobernador Gavin Newsom que el estado de California, junto con el estado de Massachusetts y la fiscal general Maura Healey, estamos tomando acción con otros 18 fiscales general de la nación para rechazar esta última propuesta del presidente Trump de negarle a los niños migrantes los derechos que tienen bajo nuestra Constitución y las leyes de los Estados Unidos. Es otra vez un ataque contra los migrantes y como fiscal general, como gobernador, como hijo de migrantes, aquí no lo vamos a permitir. Thanks all very much.
El presidente Trump en este caso le entiende que en muchas de las ocasiones está rompiendo la ley, continúa realizando todo este tipo de acciones que se convierten en una amenaza para nuestra comunidad, ¿no?
Me pides que me mete en la mente de una persona que no entiendo y no lo voy a hacer porque yo no explico lo que es inexplicable, lo que hace Donald Trump, especialmente cuando es dañoso para nuestros hijos. Así que yo lo que sé es lo que tengo que tomar acción para parar otro acto ilegal y inhumano que toma Donald Trump contra los niños de este país.
¿Fue difícil que otros estados se unieran a esta demanda, a esta acción legal?
20 estados
y... ¿Están entendiendo todos que es necesario?
aquí entendemos, para algunos de nosotros no es difícil, para el gobernador Gavin Newsom no es difícil, para mí no es difícil entender que lo que está haciendo Donald Trump es atacar a los migrantes que son niños. Yo no sé si eso le afecta a Donald Trump, pero aquí eso no se permite en California y vamos a luchar porque cualquier niño es no solo su niño, es mi niño también. Tengo que dejar ir el
I'm almost understanding this, so I'm kind of, you keep going if you need to.
Sí, también hoy anunciamos que junto con el gobernador Gavin Newsom estamos tomando otra acción en la corte. La semana pasada anunciamos otra demanda contra Donald Trump. Esta demanda contra los esfuerzos de Donald Trump de negarle al residente legal, el inmigrante que tiene ese estatus legal, donde Donald Trump trata de negarle poder ser ciudadanos en el futuro solo porque tratan de proveer lo mejor para sus hijos y para la familia. Y lo que le llaman la regla del public charge, que el presidente Trump quiere cambiar, es algo que otra vez aquí en California no lo podemos permitir. No solo no lo queremos permitir porque es inmoral, pero porque nosotros sabemos bien lo tanto que brindan los migrantes que trabajan tan duro aquí en California. Y nosotros no queremos ver que nuestra economía falte solo porque Donald Trump no entiende lo que hace contra familias que son trabajadoras. Así que tomamos esta segunda acción este día para poner amparo en el esfuerzo de Donald Trump de negarle al residente legal los derechos que tiene bajo la Constitución y bajo las leyes de los Estados Unidos.
¿Considera que todas estas acciones legales van a traer confianza nuevamente entre nuestra comunidad, que realmente sí la está perdiendo?
Yo lo que sé es que el que vino a este país para trabajar duro tiene confianza en sí mismo, en su misma obra de mano, lo que hace ese trabajador cada día, ese padre, esa madre. En eso pueden tener confianza y que sepan ellos que tienen luchadores como el gobernador Gavin Newsom, como su servidor aquí, tratando de luchar con ellos. Ellos trabajan bien duro. Déjenos a nosotros, como gobernador, como fiscal general, trabajar para ellos también.
Fiscal, ¿puede considerar usted cuál es la razón por la cual?
Esto lo contesto después. Lo tengo que dejar ir al gobernador. Okay, thank you all very much.
Oh, yeah, the matrix, yeah. I'm wanting it myself, so this is a good opportunity. I will get it. Good, yeah, we actually have something, so.